Hello and welcome. This is the first lecture of the Biology 6 course, the Human Physiology course at Hartnell College. Now, most of you taking this course are taking it because you plan to go into the allied health fields, such as nursing or physical therapy or any other career in the allied health sciences. And typically, if you're going into the allied health sciences, you have to take courses in anatomy and physiology. And so this is the human physiology course. So let me begin by just talking about what is anatomy and what is physiology and what's the difference between the two. So we can define anatomy like this. Anatomy is the study of the name, location, and structure of body parts. So here we see this woman who's running here. So if we were, for instance, going to learn the names of her muscles, maybe start this muscle right here, the quadricep muscle, and learn all the other names of her muscles and their locations and their structures, which bones they attach to. That type of learning would be anatomy. Physiology is different. Physiology is the study of how the organism and its body parts function. So, sticking with our muscle theme, if we were to study how her muscles contract to generate force and how her nerves send electrical signals to the muscles to get them to contract, that would be physiology. And physiology involves the study of not just biology, the study of living things, but also chemistry. And the reason is that a lot of the concepts of how our body parts work involve chemical reactions. For instance, how your muscles contract and how your nerves generate electrical signals to make those muscles contract all involve chemical reactions. So we're going to be studying some chemistry in the course of this course, so to speak. Now, physiological processes, the goal of the physiology that takes place in your body is to maintain homeostasis in the body. And I haven't yet defined what homeostasis is. I'll give a definition of homeostasis here in a few minutes. But if I had to define homeostasis in just a couple of words, I would say it's basically how your body maintains steady internal conditions. And like I say, I'll give the actual definition here in a few moments, but for right now, think of homeostasis as meaning how your body maintains steady internal conditions. Now, most of the physiology that we're going to be studying this semester is the physiology of a healthy body. We're not really going to be studying the physiology of diseases to any great extent. But just to give you a term here, the study of the physiology of disorders, meaning diseases and abnormal body states in industry, that's called pathophysiology. Pathophysiology is, the study of disorders of the body. Okay, now, just a minute ago, I mentioned this term homeostasis, and I said, just in a few words, we can think of it as the body maintaining steady internal conditions. So now let's actually give a better definition for that. Let me begin our discussion of homeostasis by saying this. So your cells and your tissues and your organs, they're inside of you. Now, some organs and tissues and things are at the surface of your body, like your skin, for instance, is at your body's surface. But most of the cells and organs and tissues of your body are inside of you. So their environment, their surroundings, we can call your internal environment or your internal conditions. Now, just to give some examples, your internal environment's temperature is right around 37 degrees Celsius. A normal temperature range is somewhere between 36.4 degrees Celsius to 37.2 degrees Celsius. And another example, your internal pH. pH is the measure of the acidity of substances, but your internal pH is somewhere between 7.35 and 7.45 on the pH scale. And just to give another example, your internal sodium concentration is somewhere between 135 and 145 in some units called milliequivalents per liter. And so I'm just using these as examples to say that your internal environment, your internal conditions, the conditions inside your body, are the conditions that surround your cells and tissues and organs. And note that those are very different from the conditions in your external environment. Your external environment is the environment outside your body. Like we see this fella here, out in the water. So when he goes in the water's temperature is a lot colder than body temperature. So the temperature of his external environment is going to be pretty darn cold. I don't know, maybe 15 degrees Celsius or something like that. And the salt concentration outside his body is going to be a lot different than the salt concentration inside his body. And the pH of the water he swims in is going to be a lot different than the pH of the inside his body. So the point is that usually the conditions of your external environment are a lot different from the conditions of your internal environment. Different temperatures, different pHs, and different salt concentrations, just to name a few examples. Okay, so not only are your internal conditions a lot different from your external conditions, but furthermore, your internal conditions are a lot more steady than external conditions. If you think about your external environment, one day it might be really hot, maybe 40 degrees Celsius, which is, around 100 degrees Celsius, and the next day it might be freezing if it happens to be a cold day. Or, one day you might be swimming in a swimming pool where there's very little salt, very little sodium in the water, and the next day you might go swimming in the ocean where there's a high salt concentration in the water. Yeah, so the point is your external conditions can change quite a bit, but your internal conditions are very much rock steady. They hardly change at all. Your body temperature and your sodium concentration change very little, minute to minute, hour to hour, or day to day. Yeah, so that's a difference between your external environment and your internal environment. Your internal environment has steady conditions. And it's very important that your internal environment maintain those steady conditions for proper health. This is what I wanted to show. Yeah, for the normal healthy working of your body, your tissues and cells and organs require a steady internal environment where those internal conditions are within what we call healthy ranges, healthy set point ranges. Let me go back a slide. 1 second here. Here we go. So this table right here lists the normal healthy ranges for several of your internal conditions. And for right now, don't worry about memorizing these. Later on in the course, I might have you memorize some of the things on this table. But for right now, I'm just making the point that for proper healthy functioning of your body, your internal pH has to stay right within this normal healthy range of 7.35 to 7.45. And if it gets out of that healthy range, you could get sick or die. And another example here, the temperature of your body. The normal healthy range is 36.4 degrees Celsius to 37.2 degrees Celsius. And again, if your body temperature gets outside of that normal healthy range, you could get sick or perhaps even die. Well, that's true for all of your internal conditions. All of them have to stay within a certain normal range, normal healthy range, for you to maintain your proper health. Or saying the same thing in the opposite way, if you get sick or have some sort of disorder or disease, it's related to your internal conditions going outside of their normal ranges. Okay, so it's very important to your body to maintain all of your normal internal conditions within their proper, healthy, normal ranges. And that's the concept of homeostasis. Homeostasis is the body's ability to steadily maintain those internal conditions within their normal, healthy ranges. Okay, let's now drill down to the next level of detail and ask, how exactly does your body maintain all of your internal conditions within their normal, healthy ranges? In other words, how does your body maintain homeostasis? Well, here's the big picture. For each internal condition of your body has a way of raising that condition if it's below its normal range, and your body also has a way of lowering that condition if that condition gets above its normal range. So for each internal condition, your body has a way of lowering it if it gets too high or raising it if it gets too low, and that's how your body keeps it within that normal healthy range. And let me start off by giving a non-living example of maintaining homeostasis. And for that, I will use a house. Oh, that's not a house. I will use a house. And so think of your house almost like a living organism. And for most of us, we find around 70 degrees Fahrenheit a comfortable temperature. And so think of it that way, that we want our house to maintain a steady internal condition of around 70 degrees Fahrenheit, because that's what most people find comfortable. Okay, so how do our houses keep that steady internal temperature condition? Well, somewhere inside your house, you have a thermostat where you program into the thermostat what you want the proper temperature to be, let's say 70 degrees Fahrenheit. And connected to that thermostat is a thermometer, so that tells the thermostat what the actual temperature of the house is. And so then the thermostat compares the actual temperature of the house from the thermometer to the proper set point it's supposed to maintain, 70 degrees. But the thermostat is also connected to your furnace and your air conditioning system. And so notice that the furnace is a way that your house has of increasing the temperature if the temperature is below the set point, and the air conditioner is a way that your house has of lowering the temperature if the temperature is above the set point. So by having these two systems that your house has of changing the temperature, one to raise it if it's too low and the other to lower it if it's too high, by having those two systems, your house is able to maintain homeostasis at exactly 70 degrees. And let me just give an example of that. Let's say that your house here, the thermometer there was measuring the temperature, and let's just say for the sake of argument that the temperature was actually below the proper set point. Well, then what would your house activate, the furnace or the air conditioner? Well, it's a no-brainer. If the temperature is below the proper homeostatic set point, your house will activate the furnace, right? And so it would send a signal to activate the furnace, and the furnace would run until the house's temperature got up to the proper homeostatic set point of 70 degrees. Okay, so that's the big picture of how your body maintains homeostasis. For each internal condition, your body has two systems, one to raise the internal condition if it gets too low, and one to lower the internal condition if it gets too high. And between those two, your house is able to maintain temperature homeostasis. Okay, so that's the big concept. Now let me introduce some terms that relate to your body doing essentially the same thing. Okay, the first of these terms that we need to introduce is sensor. And in this diagram of your house maintaining homeostasis, the thermometer is the sensor. So what does the thermometer do? Well, here we go. So the thermometer is the sensor in this house analogy that we're making, because the thermometer's job is to actually measure the internal condition, to see what the actual temperature inside the house is. And so the structures in your body that actually measure the internal conditions are called sensors. And, a thermometer is physically made out of, glass and mercury or something like that. But what are the sensors in your body made out of? Generally, they are nerve cells. For most of the sensors in your body, they are nerve cells that are actually, measuring the internal condition. Okay, so the next part of our diagram here, the thermostat, in terms of body parts, we call an integrating center. So let's think, what does the thermostat do? Well, the thermostat in your house receives information about the internal condition from the thermometer. In other words, your thermostat in your house gets information from the sensor, from the thermometer, about what the actual temperature is. Then your thermometer compares the actual temperature that it gets from the thermometer to what the proper homeostatic set point for the temperature is supposed to be, the 70 degrees. And then depending on what the integrating center finds, the integrating center, the thermostat will either activate the furnace or the air conditioning system. And so, that's what the integrating centers in your body do. They are body structures that receive measurements about an internal condition from the sensors, and then the integrating center then compares the measurement that it got from the sensors about the internal condition to what the healthy set point is supposed to be for that internal condition. And then lastly, the integrating center will then activate one of the systems in the body for either raising the internal condition if it's too low, or lowering the internal condition if the internal condition is too high. And incidentally, we call those the effectors. The effectors are the parts of the body that can change the internal condition. So, actually, let me get back to that previous slide. Come back here. No, go back. Not there. There we go. So just summarizing the integrating centers in the body, again, body structures that receive measurements from the sensors in the body, and then they compare the measurement of the internal condition from the sensor to the normal healthy set point, the homeostatic set point for that internal condition, and then the integrating center then activates the effectors to bring the internal condition back into its proper homeostatic range. Okay, and so getting back to the effectors, so in your house, the temperature effectors are the furnace and the air conditioning system. And notice those two effectors in your house have opposite effects, right? The furnace raises the temperature and the air conditioner lowers the temperature. And we call those antagonistic effects. The term antagonistic means opposite. And so it's just like that in your body. For each internal condition, there are always two effectors. One effector that will raise the internal condition if the internal condition is below its set point, and the other effector will lower that internal condition if that internal condition is above its set point. Yeah, so for each internal condition, you have two effectors, and the effectors have antagonistic effects on the internal condition so that they can, working together, keep you at your proper homeostatic set point. Okay, now let's do one more example here with the house. So let's say that the sensor detects that your house's temperature is below the homeostatic set point, right? You know, the thermometer detects that your house's temperature is 67 degrees, below the 70 degrees proper set point. Okay, so the sensor, the thermometer's job is to send a signal to the integrating center, right? And so the integrating center then receives that signal and says, whoa, temperature is too low, it's below the homeostatic set point. And so now the integrating center's job is to activate one of the effectors, right, to bring the internal condition back to its proper homeostatic set point, the 70 degrees. So, don't be afraid to be obvious when I ask this question, but which of these two effectors will the integrating center activate in this example? And the answer is obviously the furnace, right? Because the actual internal condition is below the homeostatic set point, and so the integrating center wants to activate the effector that raises the internal condition, right? So your thermostat, your integrating center, would send a signal to the furnace because that's the effector that raises the internal condition. Okay, good. So the furnace in the house would keep working until it drives the temperature up to the proper homeostatic set point. And at that point, the integrating center, the thermostat, would shut off the furnace, right? Because the furnace has done its job. It's brought the house back into the proper homeostatic set point. Well, there's a name for that, where the integrating center shuts off the effector after the effector has brought the internal condition back into its homeostatic set point. And the name for that is a negative feedback loop. So in the field of physiology, a negative feedback loop is exactly what you see here. It's where the integrating center shuts off the effector after the effector has done its job, after the effector has brought the internal condition back up to the proper homeostatic set point. That's called a negative feedback loop. Oh, one more thing I forgot to mention. The integrating centers in your body, in terms of your body structures, are usually regions of the brain. All right, so I think I mentioned that the sensors in your body are usually nerve cells, but the integrating centers are usually regions of the brain. Okay, so I hope this demonstration of how your house maintains temperature homeostasis has given you the general concept of what homeostasis is and how your body, for each internal homeostatic condition, your body has a sensor and an integrating center and two effectors for raising the condition if it's too low or lowering the condition if it's too high to keep the condition inside its normal healthy range. So just to give an example of sensors and integrating centers and effectors in the body, let's use one of the body's internal conditions, that of temperature. In other words, how exactly does your body maintain your proper body temperature within the normal homeostatic range? Now, obviously, your body doesn't work exactly like the house. Your body doesn't have a glass thermometer inside of it and a metal thermostat and furnaces and air conditionings. But your body does have structures that analogously perform the same functions as what you see here in this drawing. And so, yeah, let's look at body temperature homeostasis. So here's the way it works. Inside your brain are nerve cells that can detect temperature. And so those are the sensors for your body's temperature homeostasis. And just like we saw with the house, the sensors then relay information to an integrating center. The integrating center for your body temperature is also a region of your brain. Yeah, so the integrating center in your brain compares the measured body temperature to what the proper healthy set point range for temperature is supposed to be. And then based on what that temperature integrating center in the brain finds, it will either activate one of two effectors. And so what are the effectors? Well, muscles, especially muscle shivering, are like the furnace, right? Because that's how your body generates heat if your body temperature is too low. When your muscles shiver, that generates friction and that warms you up. And your sweat glands, those are like the air conditioning in the house, right? Because when your sweat glands get activated, they put water on your skin, and as that water evaporates, evaporating water cools you off. And so, yeah, in your body, for maintaining temperature homeostasis, nerve cells in the brain are the sensors. There's a region of your brain that acts as the integrating center for temperature homeostasis, and the effectors are your muscles and your sweat glands for shivering to warm your body temperature and sweating to lower your body temperature. And again, notice that the effectors always have to have antagonistic effects to keep you in proper homeostasis. Okay, and again, just to remind you, it's not just for temperature that your body has sensors and integrating center and effectors. For all of your internal conditions, your body has sensor, integrating center, and effectors. Okay, the last concept that we're going to learn in this Introduction to Physiology lecture is something called the hierarchy of biological structures. Now, what the heck does that mean? Well, one part of what that means, the hierarchy of biological structures, part of what it means has to do with body parts. So body parts are a major concept of the hierarchy of biological structures. But the hierarchy of biological structures also involves the sizes of the body parts and how the smaller body parts are building blocks of the larger body parts. And so let me use this diagram to give you an example of what I'm talking about. So if someone said to you, well, what are your body made out of? If you wanted to start off at the smallest part, you might say, okay, my body is made out of atoms, things like carbon atoms and oxygen and hydrogen and nitrogen atoms. And that's true. But those atoms join together to form structures called molecules. A molecule is several atoms that get joined together. And so you could also say that your body parts include molecules like DNA molecules and protein molecules, for instance, that are all made out of atoms joined together. But those molecules, like the DNA and the proteins and the fat molecules, those are the building blocks of the parts of your cells. For instance, the nucleus of the cell is mostly made out of DNA, and the membrane of the cell is mostly made out of fats and protein molecules. So the molecules, which are built out of atoms, the molecules are the building blocks of your cellular organelles. Organelles are the parts of the cell. And the organelles of the cell, like the nucleus and the membrane and the other organelles, are the building blocks of the cell itself. In other words, the cell is made out of its organelles. And so notice in our discussion so far, I'm talking about the different parts of your body, atoms, molecules, or cell organelles, and the cells themselves. And notice that we're going from smaller to larger, and each smaller thing is the building block of the next larger thing, right? Atoms are the building blocks of molecules, molecules are the building blocks of organelles, and organelles are the building blocks of cells. And it keeps going. The cells are building blocks of what we call tissues. A tissue is a group of cells of the same type. For instance, if this were an epithelial cell, then a group of those epithelial cells together is called an epithelial tissue. So cells are the building blocks of tissues. Well, what are tissues the building blocks of? And the answer to that is organs. And so this is supposed to be a stomach organ, just as an example, but if you look closely, you can see it's made out of several tissue layers. There's an epithelial tissue layer and a connective tissue layer and a muscle tissue layer that together form your stomach organ. So all of your organs are made out of several tissues. And then organs themselves are the building blocks of what we call organ systems. You have a digestive organ system, which is all the organs that work together to digest your food. And although it's not shown in this diagram, you have a muscular organ system, and you have a nervous organ system, and you have a reproductive organ system, and a respiratory organ system. Your body has around 12 organ systems, so your body is made out of your organ systems. And so those are the concepts of this phrase, the hierarchy of biological structures. It has to do with your body parts. All of these are your body parts, but it also has to do with all these body parts. The smaller ones are always the building blocks of the larger ones. Atoms are the building blocks of molecules. Molecules are the building blocks of cell organelles. Cell organelles are the building blocks of cells. Cells are the building blocks of tissues. Tissues are the building blocks of organs. Organs are the building blocks of organ systems. And your whole body is built out of your organ systems. Organ systems are the building blocks of your entire body. Now, one thing I like about showing this slide of the hierarchy of biological structures is it shows that the smallest parts of your body are the atoms and molecules of your body, right? The atoms like carbon and nitrogen and hydrogen atoms, and the molecules that are built out of those, like proteins and fat molecules and DNA molecules, for example. And the study of atoms and molecules is the field of chemistry. And so that's where our next lecture is going to go to. We're going to begin studying some basic chemistry concepts, and we are doing that, not because this is a chemistry class, but our study of human physiology has to involve some chemistry so we can understand atoms and molecules, and so that will allow us to understand the organelles and of the cells and how cells form tissues, etc., etc. So yes, we have to start with chemistry, and that will be our next lecture. So thank you very much for listening to this first lecture of human physiology.